What's up, spell singers? My name is Garion John Wells.
I'm Drew Flitton.
And I'm Cory Janibagian.
And this is Untap
Upkeep.
Drink. Beer up.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to Brewers Week. This is day 2. Today we are talking about dark beers and Cory's Norin the Wary Chaos deck that he transformed into a Krenko mob boss token aggro, just punch you in the face, win the game as fast as possible. Sounds like a good day.
Damn straight. Just like the last episode, we're going to do the first half, just talking about beers, heavy emphasis on beers. We've got some dark ones this week. And then the next half, we're going deep dive into a deck. And like Drew was saying, I'm busting out my Gobbo deck.
Fear of the many. But first, since we're talking about dark beers, let's give an overview of what beers fall into the quote-unquote dark category.
So just as before, we got this information from craftbeer.com. It's awesome. It really is. It's so cool just to learn all of that.
Yeah.
We spent so long just looking at paragraphs upon paragraphs of information. And just like, hey, did you know this, dude? This is so cool. This is why I like this beer. You can actually taste all these things.
It's insane.
It's the secondary part of this podcast, but we really do want everybody to be as excited about all the different types of beers as we are.
Yeah, we've got this craft beer explosion going on, and we're so fortunate to be a part of it.
Yeah, and that's kind of what this whole week is about, because usually we're a little beer and then emphasis on magic. This is emphasis on beer with a little bit of magic.
Full week of just brews.
And to end the week, of course, like we said last time, we're going to be finishing it off with the homebrew. We got my brother in to help. Garion, Cory, and I actually decided to help out this time around, make sure that we dive into what it is to be a brewer in the beer world. And I mean, I think we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, get a behind the scenes look of what it actually takes to create these complex flavors.
All right, so the beers we're covering today, we've got ambers, which are divided into lagers and ales. We've got Scotch ales, which also has the Scottish style ales. We've got Belgian style dark beers, which are the doubles and the quads. We've got bocks, which also have like double bock and things like that. We've got porters and imperial porters, which is kind of an American thing. I haven't seen a lot of strictly like outside of American imperial porters. We've got stouts, which have milk stouts, oatmeal stouts, Irish stouts, and then just like the non-specific stouts. And then you also have American imperial stouts, which is where we're going to start today's episode, because the beers that Garion got for us today,
a few of them.
He said, if we're going dark beers, we're going to go all the way as hard as we can.
What was the description on yours? Color description? It looks like motor oil.
motor oil with a light brown head.
Yeah, so we're drinking some dark ass beers. And who wants to go first?
I feel like you got to go because you have the classic one here.
All right, so I've got North Coast Brewing Company's Old Rasputin Russian Imperial Stout.
So when we're talking about Imperial Stouts, this is often the first one that people think of.
It's the face of Russian Imperial Stouts.
At least for us in the West.
Yeah.
So reading from their website, they say, the Old Rasputin Russian Imperial Stout, produced in the tradition of 18th century English brewers who supplied the courts of Russia's Catherine the Great, Old Rasputin seems to develop a cult following wherever it goes. It's a rich, intense brew with big, complex flavors and a warming finish. So this is a Russian Imperial Stout, color black, as dark as they come. ABV 9%. And the bitterness is all the way up at 75 IBUs.
Wow.
So Cory and I have had this. This is probably the first Imperial Stout that we ever had.
Yeah, I think so.
And it was just like a wake-up call, because I got into stouts pretty early in my beer drinking days, and it was just like, oh, this is different. This is new. I liked it, but it was just like...
This is not Guinness.
No, it kicks you in the teeth. It's just like, hey, wake up.
Very alcoholic up front. Obviously, very bitter. But I think like a lot of stouts, you've got a lot of sweetness in there, a lot of malty forward flavors, but very roasted, very burned, toasted.
Yeah, that toasted flavor comes through super heavy. You can just smell the alcohol off of it.
That's like the first two flavors is kind of burned charred malt and alcohol.
Yeah, it definitely has noticeable alcohol, both in the smell and the flavor. You get that kind of roasted, toasted, smoky, kind of acrid flavor that is really describing the bitterness of it. I mean, I still like it.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it still holds up.
And Cory, we went back to Sam Smith's because Samuel Smith is just a classic on the show for us right now. It's just such a good brand to go back to.
Yeah, they know what's up. I'm drinking Samuel Smith's Imperial Stout, and this one has ABV of 7%.
And light for an Imperial.
And the IBUs are only at 35, so a lot more malty, a lot less bitter. Yeah. This one, just looking this beer up, it's won tons of awards, and it's on every website that had it on was super highly rated.
We've got like a gold foil cap on top
it's
of
just,
it. So
that's not just something that Sam Smith does.
Yeah, good looking beer. Sammy Smith knows what's up. You can smell the alcohol right off the bat. That's a lot smoother than I thought it was going to be. It's not roasted or toasted like the old Rasputin. It's really smooth.
Yeah, it's got a lot of sweetness to it.
Yeah,
as compared to the
incredibly
Rasputin.
sweet.
Oh, it does have some toasted notes like towards the back end of it. Has that kind of like bitterness that is on the side of your tongue.
It almost had like the kind of tannin flavor of wine when I first got it in my mouth.
It's got a little funk going on. Yeah, it's really sweet, really good, really smooth.
And I have the Drioma from Red Rock. It is, again, a Russian Imperial Stout. It's 10.1 ABV, and they do not list the IBUs. Ooh, this is also different. It has some of that sweetness to it, but the sweetness isn't, I guess, as smooth as what Cory's was on the Samuel Smith's Imperial Stout. The bitterness lingers, though.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, you get sweetness up front, and then it just mellows out into some bitterness. So
it's more of like a kind of like a coffee bitterness than it is like a chocolate bitterness.
Yeah, so the IBUs is probably somewhere in between both of these beers.
Yeah, I don't think it's as high as
I'm always so surprised when we try 3 of the same type of beer,
and they're just so different.
Way different.
Yeah, this is not as different as what the Scotch ales were back when we did those, but they are very different.
I think one thing that they all have is a very alcohol-forward flavor.
Yeah, they're not trying to hide the alcohol. On Imperials, they usually aren't trying to like cover it up by anything. So they are telling you right on the label, this is an Imperial. It's going to be strong.
I think, surprisingly for yours, Drew, I think yours is the highest alcohol, but you can't taste
the flavor
it.
isn't as much. Yeah, it's on the smell more than it is the actual taste.
I think you can taste alcohol more in Garion's.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, for sure. For some reason, the Red Rock has like without sounding hoity-toity, like a leathery, like almost chemical kind of aftertaste to it. You know what I mean? Like you get that bitterness of the malt, and then it's almost like a little bit, I don't know. It's good. I think that one would be the hardest one to drink for a newbie coming into
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Imperial.
Yeah. Like the old Rasputin kind of is like the characteristic of what an Imperial is.
It's like the baseline.
Yeah. Like you know what it is.
You guys gave me the Coors Light of this episode. Is what I'm saying.
I wouldn't even say that.
I wouldn't. No, absolutely not. It's weird because I feel like the one that Cory has, the Samuel Smith's Imperial Stout, is the entry into Imperial Stouts just because it does have a lower ABV. It's sweeter. It still has the notes that you're expecting out of Imperial Stout, but it's not going to kick you in the teeth. Whereas Garion's, the smell and the alcohol is there, and mine just has that kind of extended duration of the bitterness. It has some sweetness to it, and then it develops into that bitterness that lingers.
Yeah, I think all 3 of these have a bitterness that lingers way longer than a normal stout would.
Yeah, they just sit.
All right, so before we jump into the beer styles themselves, first we're going to talk about what the things that we're going to be talking about actually mean. So we've got IBUs, which is the International Bitterness Units, and from what I've seen, it goes from basically 0 to, or unlisted as it may be on some of them, like ciders generally don't list IBUs, to like 100 or something like that.
Yeah, I was reading stuff about it, and the human palate can't really taste anything past 100 IBUs, and so people don't really bother going past that.
This beer I'm drinking right now is at 75, and it is goddamn bitter.
Yeah, but IBUs don't necessarily tell you anything unless you understand the BU-GU ratio, which is the bitterness unit to gravity units, which is the bitterness units compared to the sugar in the beer. And so if that ratio is above 0.5, because 0.5 is like your even beer, it's even on both sides. If it's above 0.5, then your bitterness units are going to be more present than what your sugar units are. And so a low BU-GU is going to be more sugary and sweet, and a higher BU-GU is going to be your bitter notes.
This tends to explain why a lot of these darker beers can be extremely bitter and not taste quite as bitter as, say, a double IPA or something, because those double IPAs don't have as much sugar.
Yeah, they don't have that
to balance
sweetness
that
to
out.
it.
Yeah. If you go to craftbeer.com, you'll see these numbers and then like 20 more numbers that we decided not to include.
Loads of stats, but these are the ones
so
we thought.
many
Yeah,
things.
we thought these are the ones that are going to actually help you know what's going on. And the last one we have is the standard reference method, which tells us the color of it. And again, just to give you guys an explanation as to what the colors actually mean, we've got very light, which is 1 to 1.5, straw, which is 2 to 3, pale is 4, gold is 5 to 6, ambers go from 7, 8 to 9. That's from light amber to medium amber. Then we've got copper and garnet is your 10 to 12 range. And this is really where we start to categorize what we're calling dark beers. Dark beers aren't always dark. Like, this is just the coloration that we're talking about. Then we have light brown is 13 to 15. Brown to reddish brown to chestnut brown is 16 to 17. This is kind of a big range in there. We've got dark brown, 18 to 24. Very dark, which is a very dark brown, is 25 to 39. And then we've got black, which is the last 10 units because it goes from 0 to 50. And black is the last 10. It's 40 plus.
And so just like we talked about on the last episode, we decided to cut it at ambers and go everything past ambers as a dark beer and everything before ambers as a light beer.
Yeah, and so
Even though
ambers,
that's only 7 on the scale.
yeah, because ambers start at like 6 and go up from there, really. So ambers are the first one we're going to talk about. We've got lagers and ale versions of it. The lagers have your IBUs between 18 to 30. Your BUGU is between 0.43 to 0.54, which is why they're one of the more palatable beers. They're one of the more common beers you see because they're just in that like sweet spot range of pretty neutral. Anyone can enjoy them. Anyone can find them. They're not offensive. They're just, I mean, relatively speaking, they're relatively easy to brew as well. And then your SRMs, your color is going from 6 to 14. So
Which
that's
is
from like
about a gold to a light brown. And like there's a lot of range. Obviously, people can make beer however they want. And so it's kind of hard to categorize a lot of these.
Yeah, I do find it funny, though, that ambers go from gold to brown.
Yeah.
And the middle of that is the ambers. So the lager is a very sessionable craft beer. It kind of showcases both the malt and the hops. So you have that sugar and that bitterness.
Yeah, and that's you can tell that because we're the BUGU, because it's just right in that middle, like Drew was saying.
Yeah, that ratio is key.
It has both instead of one overpowering the other.
Yeah. So amber lagers have they're just a nice, well-bodied lager, and they've got kind of sweet, toasty kind of character to them. But they can also have some strong hops to them. But again, that's going to be balanced out by your malts. So I think one lager that just everybody knows that isn't amber is the Sam Adams Boston Lager. Like, you look at the color of that and you know exactly where it's at.
Yeah, we tried to find examples, not of the greatest thing that everybody has ever had, but just stuff that we know or
that we've done on the show.
That
like
people
one of
would
the things-
recognize.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've tried to
And
stick to is things that we've done.
just the Sam Adams is
If
just
you've ever watched TV for Sam
yeah,
Adams,
that's just
Boston
one of the
Lager.
most popular lagers in the world. It's what put them on the map.
Yeah. Personally, I'm not a big fan of it, but
It's aight. So next we have the amber ales, and they're a little on the darker side, and they've got more toasted flavors. They have a lot more maltiness than other beers.
yeah, if we're looking at just like ales in general, then that's kind of what Cory's talking about.
Yeah, there is some sweetness usually, but not as much as like a lager.
Yeah, if we're looking at American amber specifically, the reason why they're American ambers is because generally the malts or the hops that they're using are grown in America, and that's kind of what characterizes the beer is the American varieties of the ingredients that they're using.
Yeah, and just like with IPAs, a lot of people, when they think of American hops, there's those like citrusy, fruity, piney flavors, and those lend to the amber ale a lot. One of the best examples for an amber ale is the Anderson Valley Brewing Company, the Boont Amber.
I love this beer.
Yeah,
like the first time I had it was awesome. The second time I had it, I think I put it on Drew's Brews.
Yeah, we love Anderson Valley.
Yeah.
They have a lot of good stuff.
Yeah,
And this one's up there.
So, moving on from ambers, we've got Scotch ales as well as Scottish style ales. These tend to be, the bitterness is a little higher, between 9 and 25, with the BUGU scale being a little lower, 0.30. So that means there's a little more sugary sweetness in there. So that can range between 0.3 to 0.5-ish. And then our SRM value between 6 and 15.
Yeah, so this, again, you have some in the like dark gold kind of all the way up to the brownish.
Yeah, and I think on Craft Beer's website, one of the things that stood out between the differences of Scotch ales and Scottish style ales is the alcohol prevalence. On the Scotch ales, it has the alcohol is noticeable to hot.
Yeah, they're also called wee heavies, which I think is amusing. But the alcohol is something that you're going to notice. The smell is going to be there. The taste is going to be there on most of them.
Which I think that's what, if you've ever had a Scotch ale and it wasn't burning or you couldn't taste the alcohol, I think it might have been a Scottish style ale. And I think a lot of the Scotch ales that we've had were Scottish style ales instead of actual Scotch ales.
Yeah, and actual Scotch ales, not just the prevalence of the alcohol, but the actual alcohol content on them is going to be higher.
Yeah, and that's mostly because they are so sweet. And so they have a lot more sugars in those beers to
And so
convert
the yeast
to
feeds,
alcohol.
yeast feeds on it.
Yeah, they have a much higher
Which makes
gravity.
delicious beers.
Yeah, honestly, Scotch ales have quickly become one of my favorite styles.
I was
of
going
beer.
to say, we did a whole episode with Scotch style ales and Scotch ales, and me and Drew were just talking about it a few days ago that we were really impressed. Like,
Well, I keep going back. to
yeah, I
Scotch
never really
ales.
thought
They're
to
so
like
good.
go grab one, but now that I know what's there, it's like I want to try them all.
Yeah,
and see
and
which
it's
one's
either
the
going to be
best.
this week or next week. We're going to have on Drew's Brews a Scotch ale. There's a local one, I think it's from Montana, that I picked up specifically for it because I keep on finding Scotch ales. And literally, if I find it at Marcellus or just at a store, I pick up and I
They're
said, I'm
all
going to
so
try it.
good.
Yeah, turns out.
So Scotch ales are very sweet because they have a lot of sugary malts involved in the brewing process. So that's going to delineate them from some of these other dark beers. They're very sweet, which lends to a higher alcohol in their brews.
Yeah, they usually have a lot of caramel flavors that comes out. And if you look back at the BUGU, it's 0.3 to 0.5. So it never goes past on the bitterness scale. It's always on the lower sweetness scale.
And so we had the Founder's Dirty Bastard on the show, which was absolutely fantastic. And we also had the Claymore from Great Divide, which was actually our beer of the show. It was super good. It was awesome.
Yeah, it had a really sweet can as well. I think it was like plaid, like a kilt.
It was a kilt, yeah.
Yeah, not whatever that style of print is. And then we've also got the Scottish style ales, which a lot of the beers that we have probably are closer to.
Yeah, so these are similar to a Scotch ale, but they kind of retain a malt forward character. In general, like we said, they're going to have a lower alcohol content, and they're kind of trying to mimic a Scotch ale without being able to like go that full way.
I don't mean this in a bad way, but if a Scotch ale is a regular beer, Scottish style ales are more of a Utah version
Right.
of Scotch ales. They're
not
a
as
lot
punchy.
smoother
Yeah.
and lower alcohol.
They try to kind of retain that characteristic without being crazy high alcohol.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you look at Scotch ales, they're like 6.6 to 8 point something, whereas Scottish style ales are more like 4.4 to like 6 point something.
Yeah, they're more sessionable. And I'm not trying to say that they're watered down or anything. They're just a lot less intense.
Yeah. And so the example we have here is just our local hero. It's Idaho Brewing Company's Scotch Ale, which is more of a Scottish style ale. It's the best beer that IBC makes,
It really is.
but it's just such a good beer. Like, it's not like they don't have other good beers. They've got the raspberry wheat that I had recently, and that one was very, very good. But this is just
Sounds
like
delicious.
the award winner from, like, they literally take it to competitions in Idaho and just clean house with it.
yeah, this is the one that put them on the map. So if you're ever in Idaho Falls, go to IBC and get a growler because it's worth it.
Yeah, it's delicious.
So to wrap up these Scotch and Scotch style ales, it's good to know hops are not going to play a huge role in these styles. So you're not going to have a lot of hop forward flavor. The bitterness is going to come from a lot of that alcohol and the roasted malts. Before we move on, I want to read the description from craftbeer.com. They say it retains a malt forward character with some degree of caramel-like malt flavors and a soft and chewy mouthfeel, which is an interesting way to describe the beer. But
Are they talking
know what
about
they're
bread?
talking about. Yeah, right. But basically, Scotch ales are they're leaning into that dark realm. They're not super dark, but they are sweet, and some can be quite alcoholic. So they're quite delicious. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, huge fan.
If we're talking about alcoholic beers, the next couple can really punch you in the face. We've got Belgian-style dark beers. So like we talked about on the last episode, Belgian-style beers are all over the place.
Yeah.
The ones that we're looking at, so the Belgian Quad, the quadruple, is got the IBU range between 25 and 50, so it's a bit on the hoppier side, but your BU to GU ratio is 0.3 to 0.42, so really the actual flavor is going to be sweeter. And for as far as the color, the SRM index is between 8 and 20, so you see that dark brown color start to come through. As for the Belgian style doubles, IBU's 20 to 35, so not quite as hoppy, but again, your BU to GU ratio is around 0.3 to 0.4, and then your SRM is actually going to be darker, between 16 to 36, so from light brown to dark brown, almost black.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, so doubles have that darker, dark brown characteristic that you're going to see, whereas quads are a little lighter. We already mentioned triples in the last episode, which are oddly, even though it should be between these two, it's not.
So again, with these beers, the hop bitterness is going to be medium low to medium, so not super forward, but probably a little more than what you would get in most Scotch ales. And it's interesting. It says that yeast-generated fruity esters, especially banana, can be apparent. So these ones are going to be a little more fruity, a little more floral, not necessarily citrusy, but they are going to be sweeter beers.
Yeah, and I think the doubles that we've had on, when we say that there's like some funk going on, it's this kind of fruity esper that they're talking about, that weird banana.
It's like
fruity,
the
weird,
yeast's
like
kind of giving off their
it's like
own
spoiled wine kind of tasted, but it's delicious at the same time.
Yeah.
Doubles, again, they're going to be like that brown to very dark. They've got a sweetness that's more on the malty side. Could be kind of more like cocoa or like a sweeter coffee. But again, as Garion was saying, like the hop bitterness isn't really there. So it's just a solid beer.
So for our example with the doubles, we have the Abbey Double by Elm City Brewing Company. And for our quad, we've got the Sixth Glass by Boulevard Brewing Company.
Yeah, and so we kind of already got into this, but quads are kind of weird when it comes to doubles and triples, especially because they're lighter than the doubles, but not as light as the triples. And they've got a lot of the sweetness like a double, but they also have hoppiness like a triple. They're sort of in the middle, and yet they're number 4.
Which, I don't understand
It's really weird
how they got named. But it's often referred to as the Belgian Strong Dark. And that's often because of the alcohol content that's associated with them.
Yeah, these ones are usually on the high end.
And so the example we chose here, like Aaron said, was the Boulevard Brewing Company's The Sixth Glass, which is even more confusing that it's the Sixth Glass, even though it's a quad.
Yeah, quads and doubles and triples.
They're so different that it's just weird how they're named what they are.
Goofy fucking Belgians.
Yeah, I think
out here.
just Belgian style beers. I think we've talked about them before. How just they're just so unique because there's, like we've said, they're just weird and they have a lot going on with their flavor profiles.
Yeah, we could literally do a Brewers Week all about just Belgian style beers and the few that we've talked about on the show, both today and yesterday.
Okay, but enough about Belgium. We're going to German.
You're going to hit the box. I do like the German style Bock. It's kind of like a classic beer. IBUs, you're looking at 20 to 30, so it's not too high. Your BU to GU ratio is 0.3 to, again, about 0.4. But your SRM is 20 to 30, so it's going to be a darker beer. We're looking at some of the like darker brown beers.
Yeah, so we're sort of out of this range now where it's golden, amber colors. It's just brown to black.
Yeah, black starts at 40, so you see where we're at. Like the range, how it
we're
just
not
goes,
even at black.
Yeah, it accelerates very quickly.
So traditionally, Bocks are malt-only brews, so no hops
Sounds
at
like
all.
my kind of beer.
Yeah, that's you can tell that from the BU-GU ratio. It's 0.3 to 0.4. And so they're high in sweetness, and they usually have like toasted flavors or like a nut flavor in them.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of like earthy, nutty.
Yeah, I don't think I've had a lot of Bocks, but all the ones that I've had, it's just like hits you in the face with how strong and malty they are.
Yeah, and not to like bag on American breweries at all, but so all of the American Bocks that I've had just cannot compare at all to the imported Bocks that I've had. So I just think this is funny. And Cory and I know a bit of German, so when we were looking up Bock, it literally translates as goat in German. And so it makes sense because a lot of imports have a goat on their label.
And so our example is the Anger Celebrator Doppelbock.
What I love about this beer is that when you get it in the bottle, it has like a little keychain thing attached to it that's a goat.
Yeah, it has a little goat figurine tied with a ribbon around the bottle. And a lot of times if you get this on draft, they have certain glasses with the little goat figurine tied around the bottom of the glass.
They literally have a special box
It's
glass.
super cool.
All right, so now we're starting to get into my favorite. Garion, you're starting to come into my side. Come to the dark side.
I've definitely, over the last year, started to enjoy dark beers so much more. And to step daintily into this wild side, we're going to move on to porters. And I don't know if you can call it dainty, but we've got English-style brown porters. Our list here for kind of statistics. The IBUs range between 20 to 30. With the BU-GU units being 0.5 to 0.6. So the porters are a little more bitter than what
they
we've
have
been talking
slightly bitter, but they're still fairly balanced.
Right. And their color is 30 to 35. So not quite black.
Yeah, they got
but
the
dark
dark
as
brown.
fuck. Yeah.
And so the reason why we chose the English style to talk about is because it's kind of the classic characterization of what a porter is. There's also the robust porter, but I feel like most of the porters that people have is actually more of that English style than it is the robust porter. So the English style porters, they don't have the roasted barley or that like kind of acrid burnt flavor that you get from the malts. It's got this lower to medium sweetness that you get from the malts. The sweetness is kind of characterized as like chocolatey, like that. I mean, we always say chocolatey when we talk about porters. It's got a little bit of bitterness from the hops. It's not too much. It's again like it is a little bit more bitter than it is sweet, but it's like the baby step before you jump into stouts.
Yeah, and I think categorizing them as chocolate is like a very important thing because chocolate is really sweet, but it's also really bitter, and so I think that's a good place to put porters because they're sweet, but they're also on the bitter scale.
And so we couldn't talk about porters without talking about Deschutes Black Butte Porter. It's not my favorite beer of all time, but it's the beer that if you have it on tap, I'm not going to not order it. Let's keep things moving along here. We've got the American Imperial Porter. This is kind of the subcategory we're going to talk about.
Basically, these are similar to an English-style brown porter, but the IBUs are between 35 and 50, so they're going to have a little more bitterness to them. But notably, the BU-GU scale is 0.4 to 0.5, so that bitterness is more balanced
towards the sweet end.
Sweet, yeah.
So the IBUs, again, this is why I think that the BU to GU scale is so important on beers.
So important.
It's because IBUs, it tells you that there is a lot of bitterness to it, but it's balanced out by the malty characteristics of it that gives it that sweetness. The alcohol content is going to be higher, but also I like that the SRM on this one, if it's dark, it's too dark. SRM is 40 plus. It's black. Like that's
you
it's
can
black.
see through it. We didn't do it right.
So just like the English style brown porter, they don't have a lot of that burnt or roasted barley or malt flavor. And like Gary and Drew were saying, they're a lot more on the sweeter side. So this can include flavors like caramel and cocoa.
But they still have, because they are a fairly balanced beer, they still have that hop characteristic to it that adds that bitterness to it.
Yeah, and that's why I think denoting that it's an American Imperial Porter lets people know that there's hoppiness in the beer, because Americans love their hops.
Yeah, especially if you're in the Northwest. So the example we have here is the North Star Imperial Porter from Twisted Pine Brewing Company.
Now we get to move on into the big boy land of stouts.
It's my favorites.
So I think when anybody says dark beer,
They think of stouts.
they always think of
Immediately.
stouts and then porters. But we're diving into stouts.
So the classic American stout, it has a higher IBU rating. It's got 35 to 60. We got the BU to GU ratio of 0.7 to 0.8. And again, SRM 40 plus. It's black. It's dark. And so the things that we kind of characterize stouts is that they've got a lot of these dark roasted malts with these American hops. You know, an American stout's going to have American hops, surprise. That gives this kind of unique experience that you have compared to all other beers, even the closest beer to it, which is the porters.
Yeah, and like we were just saying earlier, if there's an American style of beer, it's probably going to be hoppier. And this includes stouts.
Yeah.
And so even though it has all of those roasted, earthy flavors, it's going to have that bitterness to it, which just adds another layer of depth to it.
So again, like we were saying with all of these other varieties of beers, we've got stouts that have their own categories. We've got milk stouts, which is probably my favorites. We've got oatmeal stouts, Irish stouts, breakfast stouts. Like the list goes on. I'm sure that there's varieties that we don't even know about because varieties are so localized. And the example we have, which we've had on the show, is the milk stout from Left Hand Brewing Company. It is America's stout.
It's
Or at least
so
that's
good.
the claim. But it's in my top 5 for a reason. It's just so good, so smooth, so creamy, especially when it's on nitro, which is just so good. Of course, this episode wouldn't be complete without talking about the Imperial Stout. So
They're last on this list for a reason.
Yeah, they
And we
are
choking these motherfuckers down.
I mean, you say that. I'm sipping mine. I'm happy.
I know, they are good.
So IBUs, again, they're bitter. 50 to 80. The BU to GU, we've got 0.6 to 0.8. And SRM, again, it's dark, it's black,
Black
it's
as the
40
night.
plus.
So these American Imperial Stouts are going to be the darkest and the highest alcohol content stouts.
Yeah, these are generally going to be the strongest alcohol content beers that you can get.
Yeah, they're the end of the spectrum, basically. If you take it all the way back to the beginning of this episode, when we were trying all these beers, because spoilers, we all have Imperial Stouts right here.
Whoa.
We all categorize them as super dark. You can't see through them at all. And they're super, super malty and sweet.
But still have that bitterness that just carries through.
A lot of them had that residing bitterness, and a lot of them had that roasted, earthy flavor that comes through.
Yeah, so there's, again, that bitterness comes from the roasted malts as well as the hops, and so it just has that twofold 1-2 punch that just carries through, and you taste that, I feel like, in different parts of the beer. I feel like the hops kind of comes off in a little bit of the smell, and then like that lingering taste, I feel is more of a hop, at least on my beer, which is the Drioma from Red Rock. And the hops, it's weird because it kind of like fades from the cocoa kind of coffee, roasted malty bitterness into a hoppy bitterness, which personally I kind of dig, which usually I don't like hoppy bitterness. But on this, because it changes between that kind of roasted malty bitterness into that hoppy, it's really pleasant. I don't think it's the best beer today, but I still think it's a damn good beer.
Oh yeah, Red Rock never disappoints.
And then, of course, we've got Old Rasputin from the North Coast Brewing Company.
Good old Rasputin.
It's a classic. I think that's the word I've been looking for this episode, is that it's a classic.
We use it as our example for a reason.
Yep.
It's just, when you think of an American Imperial Stout, Rasputin just has everything.
So I think we've had North Coast Brewing on the show before. I think that we had it when we were talking about sours when we were with Michael, even though technically the beer we had wasn't a sour, but I liked it.
Tart cherry beer.
I got it for Garion because it was like, it just screamed his name. And last, but certainly not least, we've got Samuel Smith's, a classic here, one that we're always going to go back to if we can, and just their classic Imperial Stout.
It's weird, but this tastes like it's a nitro, just because of how smooth it is.
It is smooth, yeah.
So it's weird going from the Drioma to the Old Rasputin to the Samuel Smith's Imperial Stout. It has this like sweetness to it that really is just
fruity.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that's a way I describe it.
It's just so easy to drink. It doesn't have as many powerful flavors as your guys' beers do.
I think what I said at the top of the show is correct. Is that if you're going to look into Imperial Stouts, that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Like if that's your diving board, and then you jump into one of the other ones.
That one's my favorite because I do like the sweeter beers, and the Samuel Smith is the sweetest one here. For sure.
If we were to say right now, definitively, I think that's beer of the show.
I agree.
Yeah.
Samuel Smith's Imperial Stout, beer of the show.
As much as I love stouts and I'm coming towards this dark side, Imperial Stout is over the edge on the other side where you start to go, oh shit, have I gone too far?
All right, we've talked so much about beers, which is great. It's Brewers Week, it's Beer Week, whatever we're going to call it here.
Whoop, whoop.
But beer is good.
I charged Cory with...
We do want to talk a little magic.
Yeah, I charged Cory with making this episode what it is. To be frank, I don't know where this episode's going to go. Cory's going to take us on an adventure here.
Of all the episodes that could end up a bit chaotically, this is the episode to do it.
Yeah. So we're talking about Cory's deck here. We're talking about going from Norin the Wary, this chaos deck that you had, to Krenko Mob Boss, this aggro, honestly, like almost competitive for our
asshole?
group.
I heard asshole.
I didn't say that. No.
Both.
Yeah. For our group, it's like one of the top ones. It's what we play if we want like our competitive, like, hey, we're going to try and win on turn 4. Krenko has kind of forced a change in our play group, which is if this deck comes out, you need to be able to respond to it.
Yep.
And I think that has upgraded our deck building, our play group as a whole, our gameplay. Yeah. And so I think that having you change this deck has helped. And I mean, this honestly is that has helped our play group because before, well, okay, I'll let you explain what this deck was before.
That was the thing. Like when I first made it, there was a good point where I had to stop playing it because it was just arch enemy and I would still win. And so I was just like, okay, I gotta set this aside for a while and let everybody make some
basically
new decks
win on accident,
or just get some strategies.
Yeah, it was hated for the wrong reasons, whereas Krenko I think is disliked for the right reasons.
And I loved it.
So, okay.
So where did we start with this deck?
Okay, so way back in the day when we first started playing Magic, I came upon this really dumb card.
No purpose whatsoever.
Now the different dumb card. Our friend Michael, who you may know, told me about this card. It's called Confusion in the Ranks.
God damn.
The worst card that I have ever come across.
It's 3 red for an enchantment. Whenever an artifact, creature, or enchantment comes into play, its controller chooses target permanent another player controls that shares a type with it. Exchange control of those permanents. So, Confusion in the Ranks basically means if you play anything, you have to switch it with something. Led me make a really, really bad modern deck built around the dash mechanic, where you would play something, it would come into play, and then at the end of your turn, it would just bounce back to your hand. So if I had Confusion out, I could play something, switch it with something cool, and then put it into my hand so I could play it next turn.
And then you'd get to keep whatever was out.
Yeah, and then I would keep it unless somebody else played something and stole it back from me.
So how did you abuse this mechanic?
And so it was just super chaotic all the time, which is what I wanted, even though I rarely ever won. It was just annoying. Everyone hated it. But this led me to find one of my favorite cards of all time, Norin the Wary.
A cute little guy.
He's a legendary creature, human warrior, for 1 red mana. He's a 2/1. His text says, when a player plays a spell or a creature attacks, remove Norin the Wary from the game. Return it to play under its owner's control at the end of turn. So he was basically completely useless.
100%.
90% of the game, he didn't fucking exist.
He can't attack. He can't block. He can't do anything. The only way to remove him is with activated abilities or weird triggers where you have to stifle his ability. It's just way too many hoops you got to jump through to get rid of a 2/1 for 1 mana.
Yeah, we came up with a way to actually get rid of Norin, but it involved my enchantment deck and specific cards that I had to sequence in the right order in order to get rid of him.
Yeah, because basically, whenever you put something on the stack, his ability goes on the stack above it. And so he always gets exiled above it.
Yeah, which is why activated abilities were basically the only way to do it.
Yeah. And so what this meant was that whenever somebody played anything or attacked with anything, it was usually at me, he would get exiled, and then at the end of their turn, he would come in, and then I could steal something with Confusion in the Ranks. And so that was just this really bad modern deck that we used to have. And when we started getting into EDH, I decided to upgrade it into an EDH deck. And of course, I kept Confusion in the Ranks in there, but I decided to actually try and win with it.
Instead of just being annoying.
Instead of just being awful, I put in some win cons that would abuse his ETBs and other ETBs while also causing some chaos.
Yeah, one of the chaos cards you had in here was Warp World, which is 5 red. I mean, mono-red deck, it's fine. Each player shuffles all permanents he or she owns into his or her library, then reveals that many cards from the top of his or her library. Each player puts all artifact, creature, and land cards revealed this way onto the battlefield, then does the same way for enchantment cards. And the reason why that is because of auras and things like that. Yeah. And then puts all cards revealed this way that weren't put onto the battlefield on the bottom of his or her library. So this is just like, it wasn't a board wipe per se, but it was just like, hey, so we're going to crank this to 11 and good luck.
Yeah, it's just basically you shuffle everything you have and hopefully you get something back. Sometimes you get 0 lands back and then you're out of the game.
The artwork is so rad.
It's so weird. I think a lot of people hated this deck because of these cards. Another good one is Scrambleverse. It's 6 red for a sorcery. For each non-land permanent, choose a player at random. Then each player gains control of each permanent for which he or she was chosen. Untap those permanents. So this is just a lot of dice rolling, trying to figure out everything, dole everything out. And then eventually you get to play the game of Magic. But you don't have anything that you used to have.
Who knows what cards you have, yeah.
And just this, in addition to Confusion and Langston, everybody was always switching things around. Nobody could really plan for what their deck was going to do because they didn't know what they were going to have their permanents that they needed.
Basically, it meant that the only player who could actually play his deck was Cory because he planned around it.
A lot of the time, I got messed up as much as anybody else.
So like I would
get all my good stuff just thrown away.
Yeah, so you also had another sub-theme of combat cards.
Yeah, and so the goal here was to make everybody attack all the time. And so I played things like Grenzo Havoc Razor, which allows me to goad things. But then I also played cards like Grand Melee, which is 3 and a red for an enchantment, which says all creatures attack each turn of Fable, and all creatures block each turn of Fable.
People love that.
Yeah,
when you
which
play
it
those
basically means that everybody's creatures died every turn. You couldn't play anything. The third sub-theme I had for the deck was, it goes back to the modern deck with ETBs. And luckily, I had a really good card for this, which is called Perforos, God of the Forge.
cards. One of my buddies.
So he's an all-star. He's 3 in a red for a 6/5 legendary enchantment creature god. He's indestructible. As long as your devotion to red is less than 5, he's not a creature. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, Perforos deals 2 damage to each opponent. And you can pay 2 in a red. Creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn.
And like we were saying, Norin tends to like to just enter the battlefield all the fucking time.
Every
turn.
Literally every turn.
Literally
at
every
the end
turn.
step, he's going to come back. Because your opponents aren't going to not play spells.
Yeah, or I have things that make them attack, and he gets exiled whenever
so
anything
whenever
attacks. So
creature
he's
attacks,
always coming in. So once around the board, I could usually do 8 damage. So everyone puts everybody on a clock.
Yeah, my favorite addition to the deck was when Ether Revolt came out. I think it was Ether Revolt, not Kaladesh. When Kari's have
Yeah.
Skyship Raider. So she's 1 in a red for a human pirate. I think she was the first creature that actually had the pirate subtype before they errated all the other ones.
Yeah.
And so she's got First Strike and Menace, which is dope, especially since she's a 1/3. And whenever she attacks, create a legendary 2/1 red monkey creature token named Ragavan. And you have to look at the art for Ragavan because he's got like these little goggles that he's got. And so when Ragavan enters the battlefield, he's tapped and attacking, and then you exile that token at end of combat. So basically, he's another version of Norin that's entering the battlefield, then leaving.
Yeah, he's just... I don't really care that the monkey will die because he can just come back every turn because Karizev is just really hard to get rid of.
Yeah, and so it was just frustrating, but the card is sweet and the art is sick.
Yeah, and so I played a lot of cards that I kept some of the old dash cards or things that bounced back to my hand and they were really bad, but I played them anyways just to try and get more ETBs. But one card that I threw in the deck that was really, really good at ETBs was Krenko Mob Boss. It's 2 red for a 3/3 legendary creature Goblin Warrior with simple ability of tap, create X 1/1 red goblin creature tokens, where X is the number of goblins you control.
So you might remember that I said that this is the new commander for
I
your
was going
deck.
to say, if only we had all seen this coming, you know?
Yep. So he's an all-star. He's pretty self-sufficient because at the very least, if you have no other goblin besides him, he'll tap and make 1 goblin in the next turn, or the next time you tap him, he makes 2 more, and then it just gets out of hand. And then one of the other all-stars, one of my favorite cards of all time.
This is one of the most messed up cards.
It's
literally
so
one of the most
messed
messed up
up.
cards in Magic's history.
I love it.
You're the only player that I know who plays it for real.
Yep. I think we had a running joke about this card, and then I just
Forever.
started playing it all the time. It is Jokalops, or Yokelhops. I don't really know how to say it.
Yokelhops, yeah.
But it's 4 red for sorcery. Destroy all artifacts, creatures, and lands. They can't be regenerated.
This card honks.
So this is up there with Annihilate or Pact of Annihilation and Obliterate and Worldfire.
Anything that just fucks up your lands permanently.
It just destroys everything. But notably, red still can't blow up enchantments.
I did notice that.
But
Creatures, artifacts,
usually
lands.
getting rid of people's lands is good enough.
It's kind of weird to me
It
that
should be.
you and I have been playing together for the longest of all, like our group, and I'm the enchantment player, and you're the one player who doesn't play enchantment removal because you're the red player. Like you're the one person who should play the most enchantment removal.
I'll try, but I can't. And so the ideal version of playing Jokalops is you have Perforos and Norin out. And Norin gets exiled, and Perforos is indestructible, and so he stays on the battlefield, and then Norin just keeps coming back every turn.
And now you've restarted the fucking game with
For
your
everybody
2
else.
best cards
Yeah,
on
Exactly,
board.
yeah.
And I think that we've talked about time and time again. I'm sure we'll talk about time and time in the future, but Norin is a 1-drop.
Yeah.
He's your commander. It's a 1-drop. Like having a low CMC commander is so powerful, and I think Norin demonstrates that fact more than most other commanders that we talk about. Like I think 3 is kind of the sweet spot that most of us would
3,
agree.
Yeah.
But having Norin as a 1-drop means that you
To
basically
literally
always have
get
access
your
to it.
deck and your party going.
It gets it
turn
online
1.
on turn 1.
Yeah,
You
the
are
only problem is
gone.
Norin sucks, and he doesn't do anything.
Yeah, he can't block
By
anything,
himself,
But like the fact that you've built this deck around him, which surprise, EDH, you often build around your commander.
Yep.
you have this one card that you're allowed to play it most times.
Yeah. No one ever gets rid of Norin. No one wants to waste a card.
It's so hard to do it that it's not worth it. And it's not worth building around.
Yeah.
Fuck that.
No.
Just one creature that sometimes pops up.
Exactly.
All right, so that was the chaos.
Yeah,
and instead you decide to refine it down. You found this stupid fucking little goblin, right?
Yeah, so before I get into that, there's this weird anecdote that I love to tell. But Cody and I used to buy the dual decks all the time and just 1v1 each other and just upgrade them and see how good we can get them. And we bought one, and it was, I can't remember what the other deck was, but the one I got was the Mono-Red deck, and it had Krenko and a bunch of other goblins in it. Only I got a defective deck, and it was just like 10 or 12 copies of each of the rares.
What the fuck?
So I had 12 copies of Krenko. And then Cody's like, "Can I make a deck with them?" I was like, "Sure." And I gave him 4 copies, and I didn't want to make a goblin deck. So
Wait, didn't you sell those cards?
No, I still have all of
do you?
them.
Oh, I thought you sold that deck.
There was like 12 copies of Ogre Battle Driver and Fury of the Horde. Like, the best card was Krenko.
Yeah.
But it was just so weird.
That's fucking nuts.
It was so weird.
Yeah,
I mean, it sucked at the time because, like,
Well, yeah,
I
what
don't
you
have a
wanted
deck.
was the deck.
Yeah, the deck literally was unplayable.
It didn't even have lands.
But what's funny is that, like, Cory told me about this, and I was just like, dual decks are broken. Like, I can just go get dual decks. And so I started buying dual decks.
Yeah, he bought all the. He got Elspeth and Kiora.
Yeah, I introduced my mom to Magic by playing dual decks. I think she's played a total of twice, but she's beaten me both times.
But
So
back,
you got 19 copies of Krenko.
I had
12.
so many copies of Krenko. And so I was just like, oh, yeah, I've lost him a lot. He's good in the deck. Boom. And so I kept playing the deck, and it was bad every time. Like, every once in a while, I could do something awesome.
You're talking about Norin? Or you're talking about
just OG Norin.
Yeah,
okay.
Chaos
The thing is that when you won with Norin, it was an overwhelming victory.
Nobody could do
literally
anything
no
about
one.
it.
Yeah, you just get absolutely demolished. And even on my best decks, I just got stomped. And when it did normal Norin stuff, it was just like, okay, can we please just play the fucking game? And then when it did bad Norin stuff, it was like, are you going to play the game?
Cory?
Yeah, it's like,
damn.
People would just save their counter spells and removal just to blow up confusion in the ranks.
Yeah.
And so I would just waste my turn playing that, and then they'd be like, okay, nope, we're getting rid of this before it even happens. And then we just go on playing the regular game.
And so to counteract all that, you said, I'm going to make a consistent deck with a card I know is good.
Yeah, because usually when I did work, it was with Perforos out. And so I was like, I want to make a Perforos deck. And then I started looking at Perforos like deck list, and then it's like, no, I want to make a Krenko deck. And Perforos is going to be in the 99. Although a Perforos deck would be a ton of fun. But I just think Krenko, just having him always.
And specifically, we're talking about Krenko Mob Boss. So again, he's 2 red, and you tap him, and you double the number of goblins that you have.
Yeah, and so obviously he is very goblin only. Like, that's all he cares about. That's all he ever does.
Which means you got to make a lot of cuts.
Yeah, and so I basically took that old deck, took a couple of the red cards, kept the lands, and trashed everything else.
You went for harder, better, faster, stronger.
Including Norin, yep.
Wait, you didn't include Norin? Isn't he a goblin?
No, he's a human warrior.
What? Oh,
Yeah,
I always
if
thought
he was a
Norin
goblin, he would
sure
be. He would still be the commander.
No, you wouldn't. Don't lie.
But so I just kept a lot of the red staples like Faithless Looting, Chaos War, Vandal Blast, and then I got rid of stuff like Warp Worlds. And there's this one card, I don't know if I put it on here, it switches people's life totals, like weird stuff like
I
that.
remember
Just
that one.
like all the
Just
more
dumb
totally
stuff.
random chaos stuff.
yeah, and I took out
You took
all
out the coin flip stuff, too.
yeah, all the coin flip, all the things that make people attack. Like, I didn't want that. I wanted goblins.
Yeah, you wanted aggressive, you wanted fast.
Yeah. And so this was, I think, Norin, the EDH deck, was the first EDH deck I built from scratch.
Yeah.
I didn't use a list. I was just like, hey, I got these cards.
I think, if I'm not wrong, that's the first EDH deck that any of our playgroup built from scratch.
I think so, yeah, because I had the Marin Precon that I upgraded, and all of us got
Had a
Precons
Precon that we
upgraded, and then I wanted to build that. And so I just remember going to the card shop and combing through the bulk rares trying to find weird chaos cards, and they were, spoiler, all bad.
But they were there.
Yeah,
They were available.
Nobody wants to
Imagine
play them. And so I just threw them all in a deck. And so I didn't make the Krenko deck until much later in our play group lifetime. So all of us had pretty good decks. We knew what we were doing.
It's been pretty recent still, right?
Yeah, it's only
Like
like
a
a
year?
year and a half.
Yeah.
Like, it's not too bad.
But you've got these, I mean, at this point, they're Goblin staples.
Yeah.
We've got Goblin War Chief, Goblin Chieftain. From Dominaria, we got Skirk Prospector, Goblin Matron, which is just solid. Goblin Recruiter, Siege Gang Commander, another just very good reprint they printed in Dominaria. Warren Instigator, just to name a few.
Yeah, and so at this point, I knew I didn't want to settle for the generic cards from the bulk rares. I wanted the good stuff because I wanted my deck to be good. So like you said, I just got the staples. So I looked at a lot of deck lists and was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one, because turns out if you play a tribal deck, you don't really need to do a lot of card searching. Just Google goblins and then there's the goblin cards, and you just play goblin cards. You don't have to care about any other things.
And so
whatever
to kind of like fast track this, a lot of the cards we've named either generate goblins, they buff your goblins, they do something to make goblins matter. And I think when I make decks, that's kind of like the tree that I put them under is just goblins matter. And it's like Goblin War Chief pumps your goblins. Skirk Prospector allows you to sack goblins to make mana, so it's kind of like a ramp.
It's OP.
Goblin Matron lets you search for a goblin, whichever goblin's the best. Siege Gang Commander,
Instigator, free goblin.
Yeah. Siege Gang Commander just dumps out goblins, allows you to sack them to do damage. All of these things care about goblins. And that's kind of the important thing in a hardcore tribal deck like this, especially where your commander also cares about goblins.
Yeah. Instead of just being super broad, this is goblins. He cares about making goblins, and all these other things help just do that incredibly well.
Yeah, I do note that you put something on here, which is that you tried to keep it still around the power level of our group, which I'll let you talk about.
I incidentally made it better than any of the other decks just because of how consistent and how fast and how
synergistic.
Yeah, just synergistic.
Yeah. Like I make synergistic, like my decks are entirely synergistic, but they don't have like that consistency factor that Krenko does.
Yeah, instead of like needing one card or two cards that do this thing,
any card will do it.
Just playing goblins is what I want. Yeah. So anything that makes goblins is all I need.
Yeah, I look at like my Enchantress decks and it's like they're great, and any card that I play is card drop, but it's like it doesn't have that speed. Like enchantments on their own do very little often.
Yeah. So a lot of, if you say you're playing mono red, a lot of people are like, ooh, mono red's bad because it doesn't have a lot of answers. And so it has a lot of these answers and things that help it. It's just you have to spend a lot of the money to get them. Yeah. And so we're talking about cards like Wheel of Fortune, which is red card draw. I don't have $100 a drop on a Wheel of Fortune.
God, I wish I did.
I know, right? And then we have Rings of Brighthearth for just ability matters. I don't have money for that. And then, of course, if you're making a tribal deck, you got to have Cavern of Souls. And I don't have Cavern of Souls. And it's just a lot of these cards that are just like, if you want to make a good deck, you got to have these cards in it. And so our meta just wasn't there yet. And it still isn't.
But honestly, your deck goes to show that logic is a bit flawed. Like, you know, you do kind of think, like, if you want to have a good deck, if you want this deck to be good, you have to have XYZ.
Well, it's like
you don't have these classic expensive-ass cards, and your deck still kicks some ass.
Yeah, I think that to me, it's like the dual land idea, right? Like, if you want to have, you know, a top-tier deck, you want to have the best deck you can, you put in fast mana, you put in, and when we say fast mana, we mean like Moxes and things like that. Granted, it's banned in a lot of formats for a reason, but like, you put in these things that accelerate you so much. You put in your fetch lands that name specific card types so that you can get dual lands, because dual lands are just insanely powerful. And that alone is going to upgrade your deck to be so much more consistent than it normally is, that it's just like, it's kind of like a no-duh idea, but it's just the cost behind it is just so relevant that you can't just do that.
It's prohibitive for a lot of people.
Like, you can't spend $400 on an original dual land, but you know, you spend $12 on a shock land, but then you also need the fetch land to go with it. And it's like, I don't want to spend $80 on a fetch land. Like, I just got some like graduation money and stuff like that, and it was just like, oh, I can go get a fetch land. Oh,
one.
I can actually only get one.
Or I could pay rent.
Yeah, and that was literally what my like qualm was. It's just like, I could get a card that I've been looking at for a long time, which was Steam Vents paired with Taiga. And I was like, if I get both of those cards, and then I remembered how much Taiga costs, and I was just like, I can get the new Steam Vents, which is cool, which is, you know, it's like a Ravnica duel, it's just a shock land. But I was like, I wanted to get 2 duels, and I can get the shock lands and no duels, or I can get a fetch land and only a fetch land.
Yep.
And so you decided not to do any of that crap. Instead, you were just like, I'm going to stand out with the ways I win and the way that the deck plays, rather than, hey, look at these shiny cards.
Yeah, so instead of like making a couple good cards that were worth a ton of money, I just decided to put in just reliable cards. And it's just like, I wouldn't say gamble is reliable, but it's a mono-red tutor for anything. Yeah. A lot of the time you discard whatever you're getting, but it's just a cheap way to get where you need to go. Just add that consistency.
It's the best way to do it red, really.
Exactly, yeah. But another thing that I think incidentally affected the meta that we play in a lot is that I put in some infinite combos in this deck.
Yeah.
They came out of nowhere, I feel, as well.
Yeah. Obviously, now that we've played it a bunch of times, people know it's like, oh, no, I can't let that Thornbite Staff stay because that's a combo piece. And so there was just a lot of ways to basically untap Krenko and tap him again and sacrifice goblins to either make infinite mana or infinite goblins with haste or infinite damage to sacrifice them and just ping everybody. But it all just revolved around making unlimited goblins.
And then you also have Goblin Bombardment in the deck, which you allow to sacrifice a creature, deal 1 damage. So you make a ton of goblins, you attack somebody, and if they die, awesome. You blow up all your goblins and you just kill whoever else is left.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there's a lot of ways where you might not make infinite goblins that turn, but if I can make 50 goblins with haste, I can kill one person and then maybe use an aggravated assault, get another attack phase, swing at another person, and then sacrifice all of them and shoot the last person. And that's a turn 5 or 6 win. Usually when I'm playing Craig, I would like, oh, I can kill somebody. Like, I can kill one person.
That's your favorite saying, you motherfucker.
It's like, who should I kill?
Yeah, that's the thing. I think Cory and I do the same thing. It's just like...
Cory will untap, well, I could kill one person.
Yeah. So we both do it too. It's just like, well, I can kill him, but you and I need to work together. Like, as long as you don't, fuck with me, I can kill him just fine. Just like, yeah, all right, I'll let that happen. And then it's just like, don't ever let that happen. If he can kill one person, he probably can kill the next person next turn.
Yeah, and so I think we kind of talked about this, but this kind of makes this an arch enemy game whenever you sit down, because once you start get going, everybody knows what you're about to do. Yeah. And like we were saying, sometimes you just like, I think I can kill that person, but it's thanks to cards like Mob Justice.
I was going to say, that's another one that we're talking about where you can't do that math.
Nobody ever expects Mob Justice to just kill you out of nowhere.
For 1 in red, sorcery, deal 1 damage to target player for each creature you control.
Yeah, it's just
He's got 20 goblins. I got 30 life. We're good this turn.
We're good. I've got a board wipe for next turn.
Yeah.
Like, you're ready, and then all of a sudden, just like, I Mob Justice and then attacking, just like, oh, fuck. I died. And that's when you like look to the table, just like eyes wide, just like, can anybody do anything?
Does anybody have any answers? I think one of my favorite ways to win the game, though, is with Altar of the Brood.
It's so funny, though.
Milling people out.
Because you mill someone out in a mono-red goblin
nobody ever wants that.
Deck.
And obviously it's a lot harder, but it's really, really fun.
I feel like if we can try and make this as concise as possible, the deck is fast, it's consistent, it's red aggro, which you're not supposed to be able to do. Yeah. And the curve is just low, and it really just gets out of control really fast.
It's really easy to just, if you let Krenko just live for like 2 turns, you're probably in some trouble.
Yeah, I think that our play group has realized that Krenko's out. You either hold your counterspell, or you just have to kill Krenko when you go to equip it with like Lightning Greaves or something.
Yeah, when we talk about a meta warping deck like this, we used to say that 5 to 6 targeted removal spells were kind of in that consistent zone. I think a lot of the decks are bumping it now. I think it's closer to 8, 9, 10, because you need to be able to kill Krenko once and twice, and then a zombie comes in. You have to be able to get rid of that motherfucker. You have to be able to deal with specific threats, not like with a board wipe, you kind of like to time things for maximum impact. Targeted removal, you have to handle it right now or you lose the game.
I think that for just like in general purposes, 3 to 5 specific like targeted removal spells, including like enchantment and artifact removal, which you really do need to have, is fine. Like that is the neutral realm. Like that's where you're probably pretty happy with. But if all of a sudden your decks start to amplify in your play group, and you need to answer commander threats that are coming out turn 3, turn 4, and they really are impacting the board the way that they are in our play group anyways, is that you've got to have those answers. So you have to start ramping up that removal. But it's meta dependent. I don't think that every play group is going to have that. And I think that ours, for the most part, is pretty balanced in that we know when we're going to play our competitive decks, right? And we have that kind of agreement that every night we're going to try and play the most competitive decks that we have, and we're going to try and ramp it up. And it's just like, okay, for one game, we're playing our top decks. So can you give us a breakdown? What are the stats of this deck? I'm talking about like card draw, ramp, removal, board wipes, whatever else that makes the deck what it is.
Yeah, so I put this deck into deck stats, and I think we're going to have the list for this episode, so you can look at it too. And I tried to categorize it as well as I could. Some things apply to multiple categories, so I just left them where they were, basically. And a lot of the goblins did a lot of these effects, and so I didn't put them into the goblin category, I put them into their category. And what I'm saying is that I have 11 sources of card draw.
And some of those are goblins.
Which is huge for red.
Yeah, and everybody says, oh, Mono-Red has no card draw. You just gotta work with what you got.
To be fair, red has gotten a lot of decent removal recently.
It's gotten a lot better. And then another thing that red struggles with is ramp.
But they got artifacts.
There's a lot of artifacts, and then luckily a lot of goblins make more goblins cheaper or cheat stuff out.
Which kind of counts as ramp.
Yeah, so it's pseudo ramp, and so I put them just under that category.
And then there's that
And that's
instant.
10.
Yeah.
You got about 10.
Yeah, he's got 10 of those. And I think my favorite one is the one in a red. You get one red for each man or each goblin you control.
Yeah, that one
card is so sick.
I mean, it's so easy. If you have just 20 goblins, you're cruising.
Also, it's like one of the cheaper ramp spells as far as like just like raw, just colored mana goes.
Yeah, it's not really good unless you're playing a super heavy token.
Yeah, if you're only playing goblins, it's fantastic. If you're playing anything else, it's utter rubbish.
Yeah, there have been times when I play that and just make 3 red mana just so I can cast Krenko again and give him haste or something. And just
What
keep
about
winning.
your removal? Because we kind of talked, and especially Garion, you brought up that in these more competitive decks, we need to have that removal for the other like competitive companions.
Yeah, so I have 7 removal effects. And I use effects because a lot of these are stuff that pings, so I can sacrifice goblins to ping stuff, which is a repeated form of removal, which I think are a lot more powerful than just a removal spell like Chaos Warp.
People don't usually think of it that way, but they should.
Yeah, because if I can just Goblin Bombardment your whole board and everybody else's board every turn,
Yeah.
then that's removal spells all the game.
Yeah. Which kind of brings us to board wipes.
Yeah, and so I leaned lighter on the board wipe side because obviously I don't want to board wipe all my 100 goblins.
Yeah. And also, I feel like when your format becomes faster and your decks become faster, board wipes matter less.
Yeah. And so I think the best board wipe in this deck easily is Blasphemous Act because there's always going to be a ton of creatures on the battlefield.
Yeah, so it costs 1 less for each creature on the battlefield. I think it's what, 8 in red or 7 red?
8 in red. It's 9
And it
drop.
does 13 damage to each creature,
Yeah,
which
and
basically is going to kill everything.
Fun fact, on deck stats, Blasphemous Act can really mess up your curve.
Oh yeah, it's so funny
Because it's a 9 drop. I was
yeah.
like, what 9 drop do I have in this?
Because this deck is so focused on combat, you need haste enablers.
Yeah, and so a lot of like we were saying, the goblins ramp other goblins. A lot of the other goblins give haste to other goblins. And so I have 6 sources of haste.
Do you have anger in the deck?
I do.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. I love anger. All right, so trying to wrap up this episode as fast as I can here. Give me your top 3 standouts of the deck.
So just like Battle Hymn, one of my favorite cards is Brightstone Ritual, which is just a single red for an instant. And it's add red to your mana pool for each goblin in play.
Yeah, so Battle Hymn just adds for each creature you control. Brightstone Ritual is for goblins, which they're both great in your deck.
Yeah, and I think it accelerates the curve a lot because it's 1 mana, and you're almost always going to get at least 3 or 4 mana off of it.
Yeah,
It's extremely cheap ramp, and it's scalable because early it's pretty good.
It's decent.
Mid game, pretty good. Late game
It's
can be
insane.
incredible.
Yeah,
crazy.
I think I've played this. I usually play it late or early game just to try and get a turn 2 or turn 3 Krenko.
Well, yeah,
Just
because
going.
like we said with exponential growth, 1 turn extra earlier is massive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and it's crazy how much it matters, the difference between Brightstone Ritual, which is just 1 or just red, versus Battle Hymn, which is 1 and a red. Like,
Yeah.
that matters
It's a
so
whole
much.
turn potentially.
Yeah.
And so another banger in the deck is Dark Dweller Oracle, which is one of the newer cards. It's from M19. It's 1 and a red. It's a 2/2 Goblin Shaman. You pay 1 and sacrifice a creature. Exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. So this is pseudo red card draw.
Yeah, it's impulsive draw is what we've been calling it. I think that's almost the accepted term at this point
Yeah,
in the
I think
community. But it's pretty solid in the deck.
Yeah, and so if you just use it in conjunction with Brightstone Ritual, if you have, say you have 10 goblins out, you make 10 red mana. You can pay 1, sacrifice 1 of your 10 goblins, and then potentially draw up to 10 cards. And if you don't need any of them, then just keep sacrificing down to what you actually need, and then just keep going.
And what would you say your, maybe not best card, but like the card that everyone knows is in this deck?
Favorite card in the deck? Jockalops.
Did you get one of these from our collection?
Yeah, Sean gave me his.
Yeah, I was going to say. Because we had a few of them, actually.
Oh, yeah.
In these old 80s.
They're
90s,
gross
90s
and
cards.
bad. I would not suggest playing them. I've made people scoop and hate me at shops because I've played them, because people hate land destruction.
It's a very quick overview of what this deck is.
Yeah, it went from a really bad Norin Chaos deck, which I really want to remake in some fashion, to one of my best decks. Just Krenko Mob Boss. He's just consistent and dangerous. Always wrecking ass.
So as we come to the end of this episode here, we of course want to remind you guys that if you're drinking along with us, which, we encourage you to do, be safe, be responsible. We don't want you drinking if you're underage. Don't obviously drink and drive. None of that garbage.
Yeah.
Be safe, be responsible. And of course, it wouldn't be a podcast, we wouldn't be on YouTube if we didn't say subscribe, like, and what else?
I don't know.
Share?
Smash
Like,
that
subscribe,
button.
and share.
Yeah. We're
It
on
really
Twitter.
does help, though.
Yeah, it does. So we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook at UUD Podcast, Instagram, YouTube, Untap Upkeep Drink. If you search Untap Upkeep, we're probably going to pop up.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And if you're on Instagram, I know that's weird being the guy to plug this, but check out Drew's Brews. We've had a lot of good beers on that. Garion did one for us, which is awesome. I'm trying to convince Cory just to write a full review on his own. The problem is that when he and I drink, it's like, hey, do this, and then I just take it over.
Stopping and doing it, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's weird to plug it myself, but I feel like we've got a lot of good beers on there that you should check out.
Yeah. Drew's Brews is basically all the beers that we drink off of the show. Just all the goodies.
Yeah. So definitely check us out on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.
Yeah. Tell us what you're drinking. Tell us what your weird, janky decks are.
Let us know what we need to have on the show. Like, if it's your favorite beer, let us know.
Yeah. And let us know what you guys think of Imperial Stouts and just
Go
dark
challenge your
beers.
palate
Do you
a
guys
little.
like dark beers?
Yeah, I mean, yes. Can I answer? Can I answer that? Everyone likes dark beers. But this is only the second of 5 episodes that we have planned for this week. We got a lot coming up.
The Brew Fest.
Next up, we're talking about net decking, and after that, Garion's gonna have a featurette, and then the last thing we're doing this week is the homebrew that we made with my brother Travis. So look forward to all of that.
I hope you guys enjoyed all the reviews of these extremely dark beers.
Black.
And as always,
40 plus.
40 plus, baby. Blacker than the night. And as always, guys,
Have fun.
But not too much.